Hey, what's up, guys? This is Nerd Taku Podcast. I'm your host, Eli. Joining me today is my good friend and co-host, Ben.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
We would like to thank all our listeners for tuning into this week's episode. We are two guys who review media entertainment on a 0.25 scale that we came up with that interprets all media adding up to 10. We watch it so you don't have to. Spoiler warnings ahead. Good Lord. Ben, the spoilers. Are there going to be a lot in this episode?
This one will have a bunch of spoilers.
This week is going to have a bunch of spoilers because we're reviewing Prisoners. The director of this film is Denis Villeneuve. The cast is Hugh Jackman, Jake Gyllenhaal, Paul Dano, Viola Davis, Terrence Howard, and Maria Bello. Ben, how are you doing, my guy?
Pretty good. You know, just day by day. I'm just trying to survive.
Dude, I have to look for a new place to live, and it's just like the mess of it is just so real. The area we live in is such a saturated market of just disgustingness. They want credit scores above like 800 or 700. It's a mess.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm going to try to figure that out as we go. But with this week, we're going to be talking about the movie Prisoners. It came out in 2013, and I'll give it a little quick synopsis. When Keller Dover's daughter and her friend go missing, he takes matters into his own hands as the police pursue multiple leads and the pressure mounts. This film, overall, when you watch the trailer in the beginning, it was confusing, as we were stating last week. We did not know what was going to happen, what was going on. We were confused on the name Prisoners. The film overall was just weird. It was weird. It was a film that at some points made you feel uncomfortable, but it was still like super intense, but mixture of seriousness and confusion and frustration, all the anger emotions. I just felt angry after watching this.
I thought it had an interesting plot line, but for the most part, I couldn't really get myself to really get invested in the story. It had a lot of really dry spells, especially like the first 40 minutes of it. It was hard to keep my focus on and not do something else or turn it off. If I hadn't been doing it for the podcast, it probably would have been turned off. It's just there wasn't a lot of intrigue at the start, but then as you get further in, the plot kind of thickens and you start to kind of get more invested after about 40 minutes into the film.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. The beginning of the story was so dry. I understood it was exposition to try to get you going with the story, but it was just like a little uncomfortable too. Like some of the jokes they were trying to do. I think one joke was like Terrence Howard was drunk trying to play his trumpet. Hugh Jackman's character, Keller, his wife, was like, hey, his favorite song is the Star Spangled Banner. I'm like, come on, you can't be that American. Your favorite song is the Star Spangled Banner? Like, really? Is that the line we're going to use in this for the plot? And then throughout the story, you just felt more angry. Overall, I just felt more and more angry.
Everything about it was anger. I can understand why he was angry, but the way he went about it, it was uncomfortable. Like, very uncomfortable.
And it was too much. Like, by the time he stopped what he was doing, it was over. Like, I'm amazed that kid didn't die. Like, ultimately, I'm amazed that kid did not see a 6-foot hole. So, we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about our overalls first. I gave it a 6.5.
Mine was a 5.5.
This film was one roller coaster of an experience. So, we're going to start with story and plot.
I gave that a 0.75.
I gave it a 0.5. I felt it was straightforward. You had a dad who was this come to Jesus guy who figured out how to be like super prepared for the end of the days and all this. And then you got this other dad, Terrence Howard's character, Franklin, and he was just like a super nice, like middle income suburban dad. And both their daughters disappear. One is like, we're just going to let the cops take care of it. And that was Franklin. And then Keller, Hugh Jackman's character, literally just took it in his own hands. And then it's like, wow, this story went everywhere. And I felt like Jake Gyllenhaal was the only saving grace to this plot. because his character just kept looking for the clues, looking for this, looking for that, tying things together, while you saw Hugh over here just angry, 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 beating on a child who had some form of autism. He had to have some form of it because the kid could barely write and read and speak. That's what I got from this story. And it's like, that's it. Just an angry dad and a cop trying to make sure the angry dad doesn't do anything stupid. That was boring.
There was the actual plot and then your little side plot. So the main story is this dad, Keller, trying to find his daughter and his friend's daughter because they were taken. As this story progresses, Keller becomes more and more aggressive, more and more angry. He ends up taking Alex, who he suspected was the one who took the girls, which he was. He's an adult, but has an IQ of a 10-year-old, so he doesn't have basic adult comprehension. He can't think like an adult. So he asks these kids if they want to go for a ride in his motorhome, and obviously they're kids. They're going to say yes, so they do. And they get back to the house. It's not actually Alex that takes the kids, it's Alex's aunt, Holly, who is the actual kidnapper and killer, the one who actually takes the kids. The interesting thing is Holly reveals to Keller that the reason she does this is revenge against God for allowing their son to die of cancer, and other children are fine and can join their families for Christmas. So every year, almost every year, around Thanksgiving, Christmas time, they would take a kid or two and keep them locked up and kill them. They killed these kids. That is the basic reason for this plot. Is Holly just feels like she's taking revenge on God because she couldn't have a kid. Well, she had a kid that died of cancer, and Alex is actually first kid that she ever took, and she ended up keeping him. Then there's the random side plot of the random guy who goes in and steals clothes of these girls that Holly has taken, and his name is Bob Taylor. You don't find out his story until an hour and a half into the film, and you don't even realize there really was no reason for him to be in the story. He's just there. His thing is Taylor was another victim of Holly. He ended up escaping. Holly completely forgot that he even existed until they saw him on the news after he blows his brains out in the police station. He goes into these places where kids have been taken, or goes into the store, and he ends up buying these clothes for some reason. It doesn't really explain why, but because of his traumatized childhood, it caused his mind to break. Taylor's mental state made it so he would fantasize about kidnapping children to emulate Mrs. Jones, or Mr. Jones and Mrs. Jones. He implicated himself and said that he was the one who kidnapped these children and killed these children because he wanted to. His mental state wasn't there. So that was the side plot that really had nothing to do with the story, but for some reason they had to put it in there. I don't understand why it was there. It didn't do anything to boost the plot at all. I think I'm going to actually drop it down to a 0.5 because really the only story here is a dad trying to find his daughter and takes it over the edge by kidnapping Alex and beating the shit out of him, trying to get information from him. And it's not until Franklin's daughter is found, because she escapes and is in the hospital, Keller connects the dots when Franklin's daughter says, "You were there." He's like, "I was there? What do you mean I was there?" And she's talking about when he went and visited Holly, and then he connected the dots, and he's like, "Oh shit, I know where my daughter is." There's no plot.
No, you are 100% correct there. They had a stellar cast for this, but the plot really ultimately stemmed down to two guys, Hugh Jackman, Jake Gyllenhaal. They had two different plot, basically different stories, where Detective Loki did his thing and Keller did his thing. Yeah, that side plot made no sense. I think the only reason why that side plot was there is so that that kid could blow his brains out, Loki could get pissed, break his keyboard, have that frustration moment, and then have that realization moment of what that maze was. That was it.
They put it in there just so that Loki could connect the dot between the maze necklace on the body that he found in the priest's basement, who was ultimately Mr. Jones. So Mr. Jones went to confession and told the priest that he killed 16 children and he's going to keep doing it. And so the priests end up locking him in his cellar and ultimately killing Mr. Jones. And he has that necklace that has the maze on it. And that's where, after Bob blows his brains out, that's where Loki connects the holy shit, I know where they are.
Yeah, and that's when it's like, okay. And then that ending where she's like, you better cremate me, and then they shot each other. It's like, wow, what an anticlimactic ending to shoot the villain and kill her so she doesn't go to prison for her crimes.
Well, that wasn't even the ending. The ending pissed me off.
Oh, yeah.
The ending is Keller down in whatever the hole that they dug underneath the Trans Am where she would keep the kids that she took, and you hear a slight whistle. Loki's walking away, and he kind of double takes. Then he's like, "Ah, it was nothing." There's another slight whistle, and he double takes again, and then he starts walking, and then there's a very hint of another whistle, and that's when he like turns around and he's gonna do something, and then the screen goes black, and then Prisoners comes up.
And then it went the Sopranos way of cutting mid sentence, and it's like, really?
You're like, what the fuck? That's not an ending. At least let us know. I'm sure he found Keller. I'm pretty sure he found him, but really, what the fuck? At least show us that he did. That's closure for us.
Yeah, that's some closure that we needed. It was bullshit. Acting and voice acting.
I gave the acting a 0.75.
I gave it a 0.75 as well. The acting to me, I felt okay. Best character was Jake Gyllenhaal's character, Detective Loki. I will say that because I felt like he was the most completed character. He had a little bit of a rough background. His whole idea was that he has a perfect crime record. He wants to make, he solves every case he's on, and he'll solve it at any means necessary. And he's a young cop doing this, and he's having his one of his like biggest cases right here, and it's becoming more and more of a struggle throughout the story. And you could see with Jake Gyllenhaal as the actor, he made this character feel the emotions, feel the stress. He didn't sleep for days, it looked like, throughout this, and it was so good. I hated Hugh Jackman's character. I did not like the always angry persona. It had to be there, I understand, but the persona of always just fuming. He's just fuming about everything, fuming about his wife, fuming about his son, fuming. It's like, stop. There's got to be one moment in the film where you're going to feel solace, not fall to your knees and cry to Jesus. It was either crying to Jesus or anger management. And then don't even get me started on his wife, Grace. She was just, Maria Bello was just, ugh. She was just an emotional wreck. And then at the end, she's like calm about the fact that her husband's gone. Like just gone. Straight up just leaves. Haven't seen him in days. And it's like, oh, it's okay. He left and I'm being strong. Something like that. I'm like, what the hell? You were a mental breakdown for a 9-year-old, but your husband of what, 12, 15 years, you're just like, he left. Cool.
I think that Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman made this movie. I can see why you didn't like the way Keller was, but I can also say his daughter's gone. The anger is because he knows for a fact, like there's not a doubt in his soul that Alex is part of the reason why his daughter is gone. And obviously the cops don't have the proof for it, but he knows. And that's why his anger is so up there because the police can't do anything. And he's an end of the world type guy who I'm going to fight to protect my family. And if you guys aren't going to do anything, I'm going to do it. That's why Keller had to bring out this bear of a person. And I thought that just the way Hugh Jackman had portrayed this angry father was absolutely impressive. You could see the fumes coming out of his ears. He was so angry all the time. You could the veins popping from his head, the redness in his skin tint, it's all there. As if you put yourself in his shoes, a lot of parents would act the same. They'd be sad, they'd be angry, they just wouldn't be able to control their emotions. And Hugh did an amazing job showing that. Jake Gyllenhaal, wow. His performance as Detective Loki, like you said, he has this 100% solve rate, and he wants to help these girls, and he can't because he can't get anywhere on this case. And Alex isn't giving him any information. Alex goes missing cuz Keller takes him. Then he finally gets a connection and finds this guy, Bob. The only way to get him to really talk is to let him draw a map, and he's just drawing this maze, and his captain's getting on his ass. The captain's not cooperating with him. He can't get anywhere on this case. He's frustrated. He's not sleeping. He's up for hours on end trying to figure out this case, and Jake shows that. He did an amazing job as Detective Loki. Viola Davis, there just wasn't much there. She had her I'm sad, and then they took her to where they were keeping Alex, and she releases Alex and tries to get him to talk to her, and he doesn't talk to her. And but the way she was able to cry at that point, look, this is my daughter. Show me where my daughter is. Tell me where my daughter is. You could feel her emotion, and she actually did a pretty good job portraying a mother looking for her daughter. But like you said, there was nothing in Maria as Grace. Even when she's laying in the bed all depressed, like, come on, show some emotion. Just like you can't even cry. Like your crying sounds terrible. I couldn't I couldn't connect my feelings with Maria cuz I didn't see her as someone who's actually emotionally compromised. She's just playing this part and you didn't feel anything. Terrence as Franklin did pretty good because his character was more of a soft, not so aggressive, let the police handle this kind of guy. And when Keller shows him Alex in this bathroom, he's like, what are you doing, dude? We can't do this. And then Keller says they've been gone for 4 days. They could be dying because they could not have water. They could not have food. We don't know. And we know for fucking sure that this Alex kid took our kids. And so that kind of pushes Franklin into helping Keller beat the shit out of Alex trying to get this information. And the way Terrence, just his facial expressions and his demeanor, he really showed Franklin is not an aggressive person and he does not feel comfortable doing what he's doing. Paul Dano playing Alex. He's an adult who just cannot register. He doesn't have the equivalency of an adult. He has an IQ of a 10-year-old. Paul, he just plays this beautifully. He doesn't know how to respond to the cops. He doesn't know how to respond to Keller screaming in his face. He's getting the shit kicked out of him and he doesn't know how to respond because Mommy Dearest, or his aunt, not really his aunt, the person who took him, Polly, is coaching him throughout his life and telling him, you have to get these kids over here and you don't have a choice in doing so. He just doesn't understand that that's not good. So he doesn't give the information that Keller is trying to beat out of him. In his mind, Holly is his mother. He doesn't want to betray his mom. He really knew how to make this character show on the big screen. As for having an IQ of a 10-year-old, I thought this cast was very well rounded. It was very well done. It's just the few, like Viola Davis and definitely Maria Bello not really bringing anything to the table for this movie. So I had to drop it to a 0.75.
I agree with you a lot there. Viola Davis, her major scene was when she released Alex, and that's basically what transpired is him trying to escape, and that's basically what she did, and convincing Franklin to keep going because of the kids, and that's really was a rough one on Franklin because Franklin is a very timid fellow. He's a very comedic guy, like, hey, how's it going? I'm your dad. And he never would do this. Terrence did a really smooth transition to becoming this timid guy to being more of a serious character, trying to convince Keller not to do this through the whole time. He doubled down all the time, like, we need to stop this. This is ridiculous. We're going to kill this kid. And Keller's like, no, no, no. He knows. He knows. And I thought one character that was actually didn't help at all was Keller's son. I felt like Dylan was a lackluster character that they tried to bring in. He had that one scene where he started yelling at his dad. It was just out of random a little bit, but at the same time, you could see the kid's frustration. So Dylan did an okay job, but I didn't see the point at that point. I don't know. I was the acting like 70% of the acting was great. 30% just made no sense.
His character was Ralph, and he didn't have much. Like there was no pull towards his character. He was in for like 3, 4 scenes, and most of the time it was him just being all whiny. I didn't like his character much.
No, I didn't like it either. Character development.
Point 0.5.
I gave it a 0.75.
I had to give it a 0.5 because there wasn't any real development in this show. Keller went off on a deep end. He went on a full blown rampage all the way throughout. There was no steady increase or decline. There was nothing. It was my daughter's gone. Boom, straight up. I'm going to attack Alex. I'm going to take him, or I'm going to follow him first. Then he hears the song that his daughter was singing, the Jingle Bells. Batman Smells, Robin laid an egg, that song. And he clicked it and he's like, nope, he knows something. So he takes out his gun, takes Alex. And from there, it's just continuous anger. And he beats the shit out of him. He tortures him. He creates a lockbox where he can control hot or cold water. He has a tiny little tube of light so he can't see anything. Alex can't see. There's no light coming in, just this tiny tube that he's able to talk to him with. And he turns the hot water on, the cold water on. It just tortures this kid. And there's just no saving grace for Keller at all. Nothing happens. It's just anger, 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 anger throughout. Jake Gyllenhaal, he actually had development. He had, it's just another case. This is just what I do. But then throughout the story, he starts kind of trying to connect with Keller more, seeing his anger as this case is going forward. Alex isn't giving him any information. Then he finally, like I said before, he cracks it or he finally gets a connection with Bob and gets Bob into the police station. But then his character cracks because Bob isn't giving him any information. So he goes after Bob and starts yelling at him and screaming at him. And Bob ends up being able to pull a gun out of an officer's holster and blows his brains out. After that, he goes and sits in the forum and he's thinking, and his captain's like, was he able to give you any information? And he didn't get any information. And now his captain's like, well, explain that to the parents' kids when we find the kids dead. And he freaks out, goes into his room, his office, starts breaking things. It just shows that he has a deep connection to this family and he wants to help, but he just can't we can't catch a break. Viola Davis didn't have any type of development at all, except she was sad and then there was a little bit where she also didn't feel like it was a good idea what Keller was doing, but then she convinced Franklin, yes, it is a good idea because we need to find our daughter. So that was her small little blip. There was nothing, absolutely nothing from Maria Bello, Grace Dover, Keller's wife, nothing. No development. She was in bed most of the movie. Like there just wasn't anything. She was on drugs, just in bed the whole time. Her crying, it wasn't believable. You couldn't connect to it. It was just there because her script said you have to cry. There was no connection to Grace at all. Terrence, however, had really good development because he went from this mild-mannered man to, okay, I think Keller's doing something right because I got to find my daughter. Then he realized, no, what Keller is doing is very, very wrong. He can't keep it to himself, so he ends up telling his wife, and that's when they both go in there, and Franklin knows this is bad, and he wants to stop it, especially when Keller creates this torture box, and he grabs the hammer, and Keller's like, then you better get started taking it apart, because I'm out of here. And he goes to do it, and his wife convinces him not to. He had the up and down development that you want to see in most characters, and him and Jake Gyllenhaal are basically the only two that actually had any real development in this film. So I could only keep it at a 0.5.
I felt Jake Gyllenhaal's development was super important to the plot because without him stressing and having all this fear of losing his perfect record and the connection he had with the family, his character wouldn't have developed as well if he didn't have that anxiety. And like you said, when he broke that keyboard on his desk, you can feel the intensity of what he was going through, the frustration and the anger he was feeling because Bob Taylor just blew his brains out 10 minutes ago in front of him. And that was more traumatic to him, and he lost it because his captain is an asshole. Straight up, that captain was the worst thing for him. It's like, holy shit. Yeah, like you said, Hugh Jackman, anger, anger, anger. Nothing but that. And there's no development there. He had that little sweet, maybe like 2% development when he fell to his knees and was praying to God to like end this because he knew deep down he didn't want this, but he knew he had to do this because he thought it was like his mission to find his daughter. And like you said, Franklin, the development that we wanted wasn't a supporting character. Again, like we talked about in episode 5 for the development when we were watching No Game No Life, supporting character had the best development. And to be honest, Franklin was best supporting character development. It was so good. It was so clean that you could feel the raw emotions Terrence Howard was giving in this character. And Jake Gyllenhaal was just going with it, and Terrence was freaking out because he thought the cops were going to come and get him, and he was going to go to prison, and this was terrible. I think Terrence snapped when he sat on that step in his house on the stairs, and he told his wife. He just snapped because he's like, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. And that was just so good. The raw emotion he was giving throughout this whole film. Even in the beginning, when he was like trying to find the kids, he was freaking out, like truly freaking out. And you just saw Hugh Jackman being like angry, like, where's my daughter? Where's my daughter? Where's my daughter? Just yelling. The development was only those two, like you said. You could probably argue Hugh Jackman had a little, like insy beatsy teeny weeny, but majority, like 99% was them. So I'm actually going to bring my character development down to 0.5 because of it. It was just so rough to see no true development. And like then you see the development at the end of Grace and Viola with their kids, like back in their lives. Seriously, those two looked like nothing happened. They were thanking a cop for saving them and walked away. Like, cool. That's the worst development ever because Grace just bawled like a baby the whole time and it sounded like a whale screaming. So development was terrible.
Yeah, I definitely would have wanted to see more development out of the two mothers. There just wasn't anything. They just kind of whined. They didn't do anything.
Sound and music.
0.5.
I gave it a 0.75.
I couldn't. There were 3 intense moments that really had you captivated through music and sound, but the opening and the credits, like there was no music in here that really pulled you in. And really the biggest parts were when Loki breaks his keyboard. There's an intense pull because he's frustrated and you can feel it. I can't think of anything that really pulled me into this with music and sound. I just didn't feel it anywhere.
I gave it a 0.75 because there were only a few moments, but all of them were Jake Gyllenhaal moments. The keyboard was one when he intensely did that. Another moment was when when he was looking through those toolboxes for the clothing. You felt that intense dun dun when you saw the snakes and he freaked. He's like, oh shit. And then during the car, him driving the car, his eye covered in blood, trying to get the kid to the hospital. The intensity of him driving with the sounds of trying to get through. There was little music of like intense rushing, trying to get through the traffic with him literally having no vision at all. To be honest, that was kind of it. I think there might have been a couple scenes when you felt the intensity when Loki was looking at Keller at the liquor store. Like you felt that intensity of, ooh, where's he going? What's happening? And then Keller realized it and walks back. But really, there was nothing. There was like the sound and music was more just like a undertone. I think maybe the priest's house when he found the body, that was kind of a they added a little like ooh, like a little dun, but it was really nothing. It was all Jake. Without Detective Loki, I don't think there's going to be anything there.
Yeah, they only gave a few like, "Oh, this is happening right now, so let's intensify the dun dun," but really the only thing was him breaking down in his office, destroying his stuff because this guy just blew his brains out right in front of him? That's all there was.
That the silence they gave in that scene when Bob Taylor shot himself was just deafening. It was so deafening in that room, and that's something that I felt you could feel a pin drop after that. It was just so good in that scene. After he popped it, and it was like, "Go get someone! Go get someone!" You could hear a pin drop. It was that sudden. So I still like my .75 because I think it was all Detective Loki who made this possible, like all his scenes. Cinematography.
0.75.
That's the only one I gave a 1. I do like the cinematography that was in throughout this film. I like the close-up shots they did of like the uncle who like the body. I loved all the pan shots. One of my favorite shots was when Keller was given the prayer, right in the beginning scene where that deer, you saw the zoom, it was zooming out. It was all quiet. You could hear the prayer. And then Keller's son shot it. I loved the dark tones like in the shots that they did, all the front facing shots, the third person shots. It was just to me super good. I You can feel the intensity in some scenes like with a lot with Detective Loki when he was going through the house. I love the shots they did of Detective Loki when he was doing his patrol through the house because Detective Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal, he really knows how to hold a gun, like really, really well professionally. And you could just see the camera like panning on him, actually taking its time to really show him searching through Keller's father's old apartment place, and when he was going through the house and checking things out. I just like the shots they chose.
I agree. They had some pretty good shots, but overall, ultimately, you don't need it to be dark to make an intense film. It was just dark. There were no light scenes. I couldn't get behind how they pushed this forward. I did enjoy the close ups. I did enjoy the panning out as he's doing the prayer. I really liked it. That's why I gave it a 0.75. The reason I dropped it 0.25 is because you don't need to make everything so dark. I understand that it's a film of sadness and agony and hurt, but that's just so cliche. It's always dark in those films. I don't like it. I don't it's overused and I that's why I had to drop it. Other than that, what you were saying was correct. I loved how well the panoramics while Loki is searching the apartment and the close-ups on Alex's face when he's getting the shit kicked out of him, or the intensity it shows when Loki is trying to get information out of Bob Taylor before the officers burst in to stop him. It's done well. It's just the overuse of everything has to be dark.
I see where you're coming from. I really do, because that is a cliche that's used a lot in film when it becomes more of a like a noir, dark, suspenseful story. And I feel it. And I think my favorite shot was a dark shot when you're seeing Alex in the box with his one eye. I just love that shot. You could just see from his red eye, it was done. He was on the brink of just giving up every time. And the kid just didn't know when to stop. Like he just like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And each scene they showed the eye, it was getting worse and worse and worse. It was so good. Directing.
I gave that a 0.5.
I gave it a .5 as well.
I thought he knew how he wanted this story to go, but I don't think he executed it as well as he could have. I loved the intensity throughout. I loved how strongly he wanted you to connect to these characters, but it was really really hard to connect to Keller because all he was angry and abusive and just this poor kid Alex, he can't comprehend what he did was wrong. And so Keller beating the shit out of this kid, it's really uncomfortable. It's hard to watch. And I cannot connect to Keller. I wanted to, I couldn't because he just over the top throughout the whole film. I understand why Dennis wanted it to go that way, but I would have liked to be able to connect to a softer side of Keller, like maybe realizing that what he's doing is just not the way to get information. It's not the way to do it. Even if it was through Franklin telling him this, but he just didn't change his mind. He kept after Alex. And it wasn't even Alex that gave him really any information. It was because Franklin's daughter said you were there. That's how he knew where to go, who it was that actually took his daughter. I couldn't connect with Keller. I did, however, connect with Loki really well. I could feel the intensity. I could feel the frustration and drama going on in his heart because he couldn't solve this case. And I know he wanted to. I know that he loved this family and he wanted to help them, but he just couldn't. And you can feel that. You can connect with Loki so well. All his emotion, all his stress, you can just feel it coming out of the screen. And that's why I gave the directing a 0.5 because I thought that Dennis really gave us that connection to Loki.
I agree. I agree with you with Loki. Loki was such. We kicked so well through the directing of what Dennis did. I am shocked that Dennis. He's after this film. He did a lot of great films. He did Arrival. He did Blade Runner 2049 and Dune. He's the director for all the Dunes, and it's like it shows that this film was a trial and error. It was him figuring out what to do because before that he had a couple films that he did, but it was just this film was like he was handed a lot of actors, a lot of good actors, and he had to figure out what to do with them. And he was given a script that was not the greatest script in the world. You could see it. Nothing could get me to connect with Keller. Nothing. I tried so hard. I even tried connecting him with his relationship with God. I tried to connect him with his relationship with his family. Tried to connect him with Loki. Loki and Franklin were the only two I could connect with throughout this whole story. Not even the mothers. The mothers were kind of just a mental wreck. He was directing something that was a trial and error for him because later down the road he made some incredible pieces. But this film, you could see that he was learning a lot with the stellar cast he had. And I'm sad to say that he kind of fell short. Loki was his best character. His best supporting character was Franklin.
I agree 100%.
Attraction.
0.5.
0.5. This film, the only thing that kept me going in attraction wise was the deep story that Loki was going through emotionally. Nothing with Keller kept me connected with him. Grace was terrible. Rudolph, I think that was the boy's name, Keller's son. Nothing was there. Terrence had some moments of, oh, I actually like his background. Bob Taylor, really, why are you there? You just made it so that Loki had to be more emotional and tied to the story. Overall, it was not attractive at all. Loki's story was my favorite.
The absolute horror show that is Keller just takes your it makes it for me. I wanted to turn it off. I could not handle the brutality that Keller delivered. The only thing that was the saving grace was the connection you felt with Detective Loki. That was the only attraction that kept you going. The other thing that kept me watching was the way Paul portrayed Alex as an adult with an IQ of a 10-year-old. He just did really well with that part. But as far as anything else, really the only thing that kept me watching was the connection I could hold with Detective Loki.
I agree with you 100%. That Alex was really, I liked how he was portrayed, Alex Jones. It was so good. It was something you don't see a lot of. You don't see someone portraying that and successfully doing it. So I really like that as well. But yeah, Keller was just the nail in the coffin of just terrible. Dialogue.
0.5.
I gave it a 0.75, and I think I was just being generous.
Dude, there was just nothing in this film that caught you through dialogue. Keller is screaming and yelling and beating people and he's not only abusive but he's verbally abusive even towards his friend Franklin when Franklin wants to stop all this, and he's just manipulative and turning Franklin into something he doesn't want to be, and it was hard to watch. I was even being generous with the point 5 because I can't really find anything in this. I don't even have any quotes in this written down that I could really bring to this podcast. Like it was lackluster. There just wasn't anything. The best thing that was here was when Keller was giving that prayer at the beginning as just before his son Ralph takes the shot. Other than that, there just isn't really anything in this film that pops like what Whiplash gave or what No Game No Life. There just wasn't anything there. It was just, I'm going to be angry and I'm going to beat the shit out of you, and I couldn't connect with anything. I just couldn't.
No, I feel you there. I was being super generous. I'm actually gonna drop mine to a 0.5. It was just I agree with you. There's nothing like when you watch this film, you don't hear any dialogue that just goes, yes, that's something I'm gonna remember from this film. It wasn't like Good Will Hunting where you had Robin Williams give one of the best quotes, best speeches on a park bench. It's not like Whiplash where J.K. Simmons Fletcher gave one of the best quotes ever. The worst 2 words you could ever hear is "good job." Like there was nothing there. The "Hallowed be my name." It was just a Catholic prayer. It was simple. It was very monotonous. It was confusing to actually hear it in the beginning. I was like, "Why is he saying a prayer for killing the deer?" Is it because he's trying to like make it a sacrifice type thing? Like, Lord, forgive me for killing this deer. Like, you're gonna eat it. You're not doing it for sport.
I think it was more of a thank you, God, for providing me for this meat. I'm going to use every part of this meat to provide for my family. That's more of what I think the prayer was for.
Yeah, That's what I'm getting. And no, there was like nothing that Detective Loki said, nothing Bob Taylor said, nothing that Franklin Keller. There was nothing.
I think the biggest thing that I noticed is when Keller attacks Alex as he's leaving the police station with his aunt, and the only thing that Alex says to him in a whisper is, "They weren't crying until I dropped them off." That kind of made you be like, whoa, okay, so Alex really did take these kids. But other than that, there just wasn't anything.
And I felt like the dialogue for like the aunt, she was just nothing. I wanted more. I wanted more from her, but she just became more of an angry person because God took her child away and she tried to blame everyone else for her problems.
I mean, they did good. They did do a good job of making it. Oh, holy shit! It was Holly the whole time. Like that twist was kind of. I wasn't expecting that. That twist just okay, cool. Because the way that her dialogue was set up was, I'm protecting my nephew. I am protecting this kid. But really, she's just controlling him. The way her dialogue was set up was enough that you had no idea that she was the one who was doing it the whole time.
Scenery.
Point 0.5.
I gave it
Being
a point
very
5.
generous with that.
Yeah.
Very
No.
generous.
Uh, the dark tones in this film, it was centered in I think town in Pennsylvania, and it was super. It had a lot of forest. It was a lot of woods, a lot of forestry. It was dark, rainy. It was rainy all the time. Like this looked like Seattle, Washington almost. It was insane how much it rained throughout this whole film. And then you really didn't get any variety. Like, yeah, I understand that someone was being tortured, but still, it was all in that apartment or like at the aunt's house or it was at Keller's place. You went to Franklin's place like twice, maybe 3 times. And then the detective was going around small shops and the town looked dead. Ultimately, it looked dead. I'm like, you're in a city of you're in the state of Pennsylvania where the population is about 20 million people probably or like 15 to 20 million people. I would expect those towns to be more filled with and a little more lively than just maybe seeing a clerk, maybe seeing cashier. Oh, the one scene where everyone came around in the neighborhood to put like gifts and stuff at the memorial. That was it.
12.97 million is the population of Pennsylvania.
I expect more people in a town to be there.
Hmm.
I expect that. Utah, where we live, has like 4 million, and I feel like I see people all the time, everywhere. It's ridiculous.
I was being very generous with point 0.5 because there's just nothing. There's no people, there's no liveness. It's dark, it's dreary. I understand why they wanted it to be dark and dreary, but it's so overused. It's just, come on, guys, figure something else out. You can make a sad scene without making it dark and rainy and umbrellas and cliche. Come on. And yeah, you only see the killer's place, the aunt's place, the police station, and the apartment building where he's torturing Alex. There's just nothing. It's so blech.
I see what they were trying to do, but yes, the dark tones made it really just overbearing and too much. It was overbearing and too much, in my opinion. And I just feel like a point 0.5. Yes, it's a little generous, but I'm going to just keep it that way. Recommended.
Point 0.5, generous.
Oh, I gave that a 0.25.
See? Generous.
I couldn't be generous. Why would I want to let someone watch this steamy pile of anger management and only have one good character, maybe two in the story, and a wailing, crying mother? Oh my gosh! And the abuse. My wife watched this film with me, and she said she felt sick after watching this film. It was so horrendous how bad the torturing was. She felt so uncomfortable with the torturing. I was like, I don't blame you. I felt like that they went way too far with as Keller went way too far with this torturing and this hostage situation. It was really intense, really extreme. And why would I recommend this to someone? This film is not good. It's lackluster. It's dry for like almost half the film. It's so bad. There's that one moment when Loki breaks the keyboard and loses his shit. I was like, cool, awesome. We're seeing some raw emotions, but that was it. In this film, I cannot describe how much I distaste it. On IMDb, people are giving this an 8.1. I'm like, why? Why are you doing this? This film is not that great. I cannot recommend this to anyone unless you really like Jake Gyllenhaal. Then go through his filmography and just watch it for the experience. That's it.
You know, you brought up really good points, and therefore I also dropped it to a 0.25 because like I said, I was being very generous with a 0.5. This film, I wanted to turn it off. Keller's over abusive attitude towards Alex was so hard to watch. Especially seeing his face after he just relentlessly punching the shit out of him for when he first gets him into this apartment building. I'm like, oh my God, dude, stop. You're going to kill him. Stop. And then he puts him in a damn torture chamber and he's talking to him for a second and then whoop, turns on the heat. Alex starts screaming. You see the steam, literally all the steam coming out of that little black hole. I agree. I can't recommend this to anybody. There's very little story. And then that side plot that makes absolutely no sense as to why they even put it in there. It's just like, come on, guys, just stick to the story. The fact that it's so dark and so overused, it's just that dark tone is so overused all the time. I agree. The only saving grace was Jake Gyllenhaal's Detective Loki. And Hugh Jackman showed the anger and the acting was amazing. His character sucked. I agree. I can't recommend this to anybody.
I couldn't recommend this to my worst enemy, to be honest. It was that rough of a film. But now, as we wrap up our new total,
I ended with a 5 out of 10.
I ended with a 5.75 out of 10. Okay, let me describe this film. This film is anger, the epitome of dark anger through a film, where you're trying to find two children and be a vigilante so that you can feel the glory and feel like you accomplished something. And you know, with your own conviction, you knew who it was who took him. You were Keller was correct 80%. The other 20 was the aunt he did not connect with until the end. This film is too dark. The tones were too depressing. The black colors, the dark ambiance just made it too much. The acting was a little lackluster. The development was never there. And the dialogue, scenery, there was nothing there, nothing to attract me to it. So overall, we gave these ratings because we want you to understand that this film is only meant to be watched if you're wanting to experience the filmography of a certain actor like Jake Gyllenhaal or Hugh Jackman, because you're wanting to understand why they did this film. Other than that, no. This film is terrible in our eyes. So that's why we gave our ratings. We watched it so you don't have to.
Overall, I thought it was a very interesting plot line. I couldn't get myself invested in the story. I had to pause it multiple times, trying to keep myself invested. I wanted to do other things while watching this film, and I know I couldn't. So I had to pause it, recollect myself, and resume. The performance given by Hugh Jackman, Jake Gyllenhaal, Terrence Howard, Paul Dano, they were really well done. I did enjoy their acting. Their characters, lackluster. I was just really disappointed in Keller's character. Terrence, Paul, and Jake's characters were more connectable than Keller, which is pretty sad because he was the main character. It's very dark, very hard to get through because Keller's anger is just so over the top. He just wants to fight. He wants to get his daughter back, but he goes about it the very wrong way. Come on, man, just stop, just stop. You're not going to get your answers. Alex can't give you the answers you're looking for, so just stop. Just steer clear, guys. I'm going to be honest, it's not a good film. It just really wasn't.
Yeah, stay clear. Fully stay clear. But as we wrap up, we're going to be talking about our next week's episode, which is Tokyo Godfather. When I watched this trailer, I felt like it was going to go it's going somewhere. Going everywhere and somewhere and nowhere all at the same time. It was confusing. You felt like you knew a little bit with there's something to do with the child, but I don't know what.
I feel like I know where this story is going. These characters apparently find this baby and they're going to raise this baby. That's what I see in this trailer. I think that's all it is. I don't know, but that's what I see. I don't see it going any other direction other than these three characters raising this child.
I totally agree with you there. It doesn't look like there's much to it. Even the poster shows that there's these three people who are holding a child and they're in Tokyo, and it looks like during Christmas time.
Yeah, it seems to be around Christmas time. It sounded like Christmas music in the background while they're talking, so I think it's around Christmas time.
I will give this a 6.5. I'm not holding any expectations, but I'm not wanting to see this be terrible.
I gave it a 6 because I honestly think it's just these three characters having found a baby. Looks like the baby was abandoned at some point. So I think that these three characters find a baby and they work through trying to raise this child. I think that's what it is. So I'm going to give it a 6.
All right. As we wrap up, I'd like to say thank you, Ben, for always coming on to the show. I do truly appreciate it.
Of course. Absolutely love recording these for you guys. We have so much fun doing it.
Thanks, guys, for tuning into this week's episode of Nerd Taku Podcast. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell everyone about Nerd Taku Podcast. We are on Instagram at nerd_taku_podcast. Thanks, guys. See you next week, and take care.
Have a good night, guys.